Yeah, the dildo comes out.
Yeah, there's a motor in there.
Yeah, and it reciprocates, and then there's a clitoral little knob.
Is it a vibrator?
No, not a vibrator. It like moves. It just does these ones.
Okay. They're more cunnilingus.
Yeah, hopefully.
Could you maybe give us just like a little bit of a rundown about what the machine is and what the different components are?
Sure. So Celestial Bed is a contemporary sort of reimagining of an 18th century fertility device. There was this kooky guy called James Graham. He was a self-proclaimed sexologist, which is a totally made-up profession, but he had this temple. He called it the Temple of Hymen, and it was in London, and it was this temple where he essentially tried to educate people on fertility using a lot of pseudoscience and like crazy contraptions. There's a lot of accounts of what he did, but what really happened is a kind of blurry part of history. But essentially he had this one machine called Celestial Bed, which you could rent for like £50 for the night, which was a shitload of money. And it was a vibrating bed that was like on crystal pillars, and it released these smells, and it had like doves in a cage. I mean, again, it's like, I don't know how much of this really happened, but he built this crazy contraption that you could rent, and that's essentially what the work is riffing on.
So I guess Celestial Bed is multiple things, and Celestial Bed is a tool for people to explore their own triggers, their own story. We've always said when we were talking about it and how to present it, that we don't want to give answers, we just want to raise questions, and people can feel free to just listen to how they perceive the work.
It's made to look like an orchid, but it looks, I've seen it,
Not
and
just
it looks
an
like
orchid.
a lot of
things.
I mean, maybe a few things in particular, but
yeah.
if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah. Well, there's certain species of orchid that dress themselves up as the opposite sex of insects and attract insects to try and, copulate with them, but actually just attach pollen. There's like a whole subspecies of orchids essentially that do this. And so the machine has like these petals. There's 3 large petals which also act as privacy screens, and they're made of latex. But there's also this torso to the center of the machine, which is in a very kind of a human form. The actual orifices that the machine uses are essentially just I'm building them, but I have designed and built these orifices, but essentially they're just like sex toys.
Are they just like sex toys, or are they sex toys?
No, they're not just sex toys. I've made and designed all the components, including, so the motion system that the machine uses is like using these custom-made brushless servo motors, so most of the operation will be essentially silent and extremely accurate. So like it's kind of like, it'll be like having sex with a photocopier,
Could you just give us a little bit of background about the collaborators and what they do and who they are?
There are 2 other collaborators in Celestial Bed. In realizing the work, I of course designed and built the entire machine, but it has been in very lengthy conversations with 2 other artists and creatives that are helping realize the project in its fullest form.
How did you guys get this idea and start working together?
When the 2 Celestials reached out to me with this project, it kind of fell quite perfectly with the kind of research that I was working on, that I've been working on in the past few years, that was focused on the study of systematic and personal and ancestral trauma, and how to collectively evolve and integrate those traumas through unspoken rituals. And I was working on what I call the cosmic womb and the recreation of this synthetic / biological collective cosmic womb. And then the focus was mainly how to integrate somatic intimacy rituals with a narrative around nurturing technology, and how can these two things integrate to create a process of healing and integration. So when the discourse on the machine came through, it was quite perfect because it was talking about the most intuitive, probably kind of ritual that we have, which is sexual intercourse, reproduction, and the fact that we had the opportunity to investigate this conversation outside of the bias of society that is inevitably reflected in the way we usually develop machines and technology. It was, for me, just perfect. We come from three very different perspectives, three very different needs that instead of canceling one another became just this augmented element that was a combination of all of us.
My work that I make is often about labour and going into different spaces, workplaces for payment as an artist. But I'm interested in workplaces where ethics are really construed or confusing or destabilising, like slaughterhouses, brothels, prisons, spaces that are really dense in terms of human interaction, but also morals and ethics. So this project is definitely very much about me stepping into the space and the labour of motherhood, but about how I also don't necessarily need to do that by just stepping into a pre-existing set of morals and ethics. Like, I'm absolutely happy to step into a new way of doing it, or a twisted world, or a twisted ethical framework, which just, I should add as well that I don't think that Celestial Bed is twisted at all. Like, it morally sits very, very comfortably with me. I don't think that if I am to become a mother through insemination from this machine, it would be just as human, just as meaningful, just as beautiful, just as divine as it would be if I was to do so naturally with another human partner.
A few years ago, I did this work called Synthetic Pollinizer, and it was an artificial canola flower which tricked bees into like landing on the flower for this synthetic nectar, but would actually pollinate them with real pollen. And I really like this idea of building a device which intervenes in the reproductive cycle of flowers, something that not essentially mediates it, but mimics or like is a sort of third party to this natural process. And ever since then, I've been thinking, like, if I push that to extremes, like, I want to do that with humans, you know? And that's where we got to with this. I like working with technology because I like my outcomes to be very real. I don't like speculative outcomes. And even if that outcome is ineffectual on such a small scale, I think the fact that the process can actually happen is essential to what I produce. The need for the device to exist itself is like, for me, I think it's essentially an extremely obvious outcome for my practice, like, and not just for my practice, for technology itself.
What is it about reproduction that interests you as an artist?
So working with physical technologies, I mean, like, you know, technology is a very broad spectrum, but I think my medium would definitely be focused on physical outcomes. It kind of just makes a lot of sense. Like, the height of intimacy or interaction is reproduction. Again, that's something that's like biologically very gendered, and we kind of want this machine to exist outside of that. When talking about the process of operating the machine, we're using terms like pollen and you know, the machine is actually designed to look like an orchid. So essentially we're kind of like trying to create a device that kind of bridges a biological gap but also has this critical discussion.
Could you just define what do you mean by biological gap?
So like a same-sex couple technically can't reproduce, but with the use of this machine and a third party, there is no need for like that third party to essentially be involved. It's like a very simplified version of IVF. I think like to say, oh, an IVF clinic basically does that, but an IVF clinic it's a human process slightly facilitated by some medical equipment and, sort of machinery, I guess. But I think of this machine more in terms of, something a little more mythical, like as if maybe like if you think about like a fountain of youth in like a book, it's somewhere you go and swim and you can live forever. But this, if it was like in terms of being a physical object stuck in a physical place, it's like this is where you go to do that thing, sort of conglomerating that entire reproductive thing into a technological physical object as a symbol, I think, is what Celestial Bed is, what we would want it to be in the real world.
I truly believe that if, and I know that this is what we all hope, that the machine can actually come to its full fruition and actually provide human life or create human life. And if and when that happens, I really don't think we've done anything wrong. I think we've done something miraculous and something beautiful. I think any harm that can happen is if society judges that process negatively, that causes the damage, like society's structure and prejudice causes the damage, not what we've done. By providing a new way to create human life, that's nothing but a beautiful thing. Like, I just don't see how that can be. I actually don't understand how that could be negative in any way.
I stand with the idea that I hope that the discourse can be around the fact that everybody has the right to do what they want with their body and with their lives. And this urge for people, especially in conservative contexts, of telling other people what to do and what is right and what is clean and what is it's something that needs to be addressed.
No matter what, it comes down to a very binary process. Like, there's two components necessary, but we have very different interactions that don't allow this to always occur. So I think, essentially it is reducing sex to a very simple equation when it is not. It definitely is not. But I think, like, to exist in the realm of the real, like, with the even though there is like technology that almost the synthetic wombs and those kind of things, but like to do that with my skill set, like, that's not going to go well.
I maybe want to ask you a little bit more about the name Celestial Bed and like the concept that you're riffing on, because you could easily read this as being like crazy, and you could maybe question. I guess what I'm kind of getting at is like, what do you think the purpose of this is, or what do you like? Is it going to be used? Like, is it just to start a conversation, or is it an artwork? What is it? It has to be used. It has to achieve what it's set out to achieve. We made a contract and had to sign it that with the festival, Dark Mofo, who funded the work, that any life forms created from the artwork were not allowed to sue the festival, but were in fact allowed to sue the artists or the creators of the work. So the discussion got to the extent of like dealing with life forms created after the event. There is many legal barriers to like to do that within that kind of setting becomes impossible, but the machine is capable of this process it's set out to do, and we hope to eventually do that one day.
All of this would need to be really carefully designed within the application form to actually use the machine. So if you're wanting to conceive, who is going to be the child's carer?
Yeah, I'm curious about people's responses so far and whether they've wanted to interact with it on the level of like an aesthetic object, or like, as a spectator of the ritual, or whether they've wanted to engage with it in this more kind of tactile and potentially reproductive sense as well?
It's a good question, because it's something that our initial exhibition didn't really allow for. It didn't really invite that kind of consideration, or we didn't really beckon or call for the audience to ask to engage or think about themselves engaging in that way. They were really looking at and considering our proposal, but we are developing a small print magazine, or like a catalogue, which will have a lot more detail about the machine, a user's manual, some photographs from the exhibition, but also an application form. All of this needs to be workshopped really, really carefully, because how we ask those questions about, do you want this to lead to conceiving a child or insemination? How we ask these questions is really important to navigate the ethics of the machine.
In a sense, I think like what you're trying to do with the agreement is it's some form of consent contract. People are sort of consenting to use the machine in a way that is not against the ethics that you have envisioned for it.
Again, I think when we talk about ethics, it's something really personal. I think the machine invites you to explore your own ethics and learn to make your boundaries very, very clear. The machine accommodates whatever you feel is right for yourself. It doesn't aim to judge or to limit it or to say something absolute or objective. Also, in a transhuman discourse, we've also been talking a lot about what is natural anyway, and how natural technology is, because we are already posthumans. We live in a society that is integrating technology smoothly. From a societal point of view, we found very interesting that we are still so resistant to accept the idea that technology is not other from us. So I guess we kind of wanted to make that quite literal. The three of us, at certain points, we all fell in love with the machine in a way that was very organic.
This machine is much more organic and sexual than conceiving through medical assistance. So when I went through the process of starting to freeze my eggs, and the conversations are so sterile, but also the treatment's so sterile, and they strip you of everything that makes you feel comfortable, to be able to just step into a process where you can still actually, like, yes, it's sex with a machine, but you can still orgasm, or you can still express yourself through physical intimacy with that machine. It feels a lot more organic in comparison to medical interventions that are currently available.
In terms of going back to transpersonal intimacy, we don't need to experience connection just with one another. It's not as biased as we are used to be, as we are accustomed to be. As soon as you start experiencing the idea that everything around you is a byproduct of existence, and you are part of the existence too, suddenly everything, especially natural beings, but also technological beings around you, they become an extension of yourself. We are not other than technology. We are not other than the tree. We are not other than each other. And then as soon as you start feeling held and part of a reality that is connected, suddenly intimacy with a machine feels as real as intimacy with another human being.
To what degree is pleasure involved in the actual process that you're describing?
Hydra has created like these gowns that you'll wear when you interface the machine, and so you become part of like this whole, you kind of fit how it looks, is how you'll look. So again,
you'll fit in seamlessly with the machine.
You'll just vibe with the machine.
Is pleasure an essential part of working with the machine or enacting it?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, pleasure is part of it. And I think like there should be a system of reward in reproduction. So there are a lot of accessories, I guess, in the machine to cause extra stimulation. I don't really know how you extract semen without orgasm, but yeah,
directly from the testicles, presumably.
Yeah, just a big syringe right in there. Yeah.
I think it's just one of these things that's really interesting because, you know, I think people kind of try and imagine that they always try to ascribe a politics to, you know, everybody has their own things and their own kinks, and there's all these different categories and all these different things you can be. But when it comes to reproduction, it's obviously like there's a particular position that is best for the cervix to be open.
We were talking about the butt earlier, and you were sort of, I guess there was an implication that the butt was a sort of universal signifier of ready to go. You know what I mean? Like the person
presenting.
Yeah, the person inseminating gets presented with the butt, and the person being inseminated seems to also present the butt.
Yeah.
And it seems like in the effort to perfect and make efficient this process, you have included the thing that is precisely what is least efficient about humans, which is precisely their desires, which are always inefficient, arguably. Was there any attempt or desire to eliminate desire from this process?
The work itself had to have objects, synthetic objects that were obviously like attractive or like shapes that could be understood as attractive, and then offer this reward. The nectar would then become the orgasm, and the semen is the pollen, you know, and the machine can transfer this pollen.
I feel like a lot of conversations about the female orgasm recently have been about the fact that you can get all these sex toys or these sex aids that help you achieve an orgasm as a woman, and that's framed as being incredibly liberating. But what you're doing with this machine, if you can achieve everything you've set out to achieve, is a pleasurable experience for both parties, and you're putting a lot of attention into making that achievable. Do you think that there's maybe something kind of troubling about perfecting sex?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, like, you think about like incels and the surreal standard. People already fall in love with online avatars and things that don't actually exist. And I think there's a real risk of that becoming more of a thing.
I suppose to me, it seems like the possibility of celestial bed is also almost a perfection of sexual stimulation, or a perfection of the process of sex.
We can guarantee it's not perfect. Room for improvement. I think for me, in terms of the design process, I really considered something that was like uncanny, but like in to the extent, like, so I tried to avoid vibrations to my own detriment, it turns out, but like try and use human mechanics to cause stimulation. Everything is there to facilitate what we wanted to achieve, but the ergonomics are a little so around the edges.
It's such an impossible task as well. I don't think you can make a perfect machine. I think that sex is too elusive. To give a bit of context, I've also done sex work in brothels where like clients will come in and me and a bunch of other workers will line up and introduce ourselves in our service, and they'll pick one of us based on who seems to be able to give them the best kind of intimacy, satisfaction and pleasure. But even still, like randomly through years of sex work, I still don't really know what that X factor is that makes it a good or bad booking or a good or bad session. Like, it's so mysterious. And if we can't conceive it in our own minds, how can we actually put a machine to work to fulfill that?
And that's exactly what I think was amazing about the making of the machine. The fact that we did find ourselves talking with each other about, like, even the conversation about female anatomy and female pleasure is something that we, people with female body, didn't even know how to address until very recently. And we are still learning. I think that it doesn't aim to be perfect, the machine, but it aims to start a conversation about something that is changing and is evolving. So it's not aiming to be perfect, but it's aiming to try and have that conversation.
As well, like the machine itself, the design changed a few times, and we had a meeting with an IVF specialist about actual like positions for insemination, and talked at length about like design, how some of these elements of the machine might operate. the sort of like attractive element of the machine is a butt, like it's a booty, because it kind of sits in this area of being like universal but also non-gendered.
When you say attractive though, you mean attractive for the person providing the semen?
No, like the person receiving as well actually leans over it and is penetrated from behind. There's a mechanism that raises behind you and can deliver, which was supposedly an ideal position for insemination, and so that's why we went with it. But it's also like the first, I don't know, the position that you enter the machine at, regardless of if you're entering it or it's entering you, I thought was kind of there's like a hierarchy, like you're on top of it, or you're on top of it and it's behind you. But that is essentially what we had to do to actually achieve the correct angle for insemination. So that was like a technical thing, but also, yeah, it kind of, the machine's definitely a bottom regardless of like
Topping the person who's being inseminated, isn't that what you're saying?
you're lying on a torso, so there's a component that there's like a torso, you go on top of it, whether you're entering it or it's entering you from behind. So and it essentially does achieve this mystical thing of like, you know, if you really don't want to have binary sex for reproduction, the machine is set to achieve that, you know, mediate that or
But is it
facilitate
though?
that.
Because I mean, like as we've discussed, like there's still like a penis going into a vagina. Like it's still very, it seems like it's very heterosexual, and the position you're taking is, you know, obviously you're a bottom. Like it
The
feels
machine's
like
a
it's
bottom. The machine.
It seems like the experience still seems like you're getting it doggy style.
I know. Yep. That's how it supposedly has
Yeah.
to be.
I guess I'm interested in that. So you were saying that there's a technical requirement here, and are you trying to divorce that from the symbolic understandings we have of topping and bottoming, or are you embracing it?
I think accepting it. Yeah, essentially accepting it. But I mean, sex itself, really, regardless of like who's doing it or what's happening, as far as I understand, is always a mechanical process. The procedure itself requires movement to achieve orgasm. Like, you know, and I only work really with moving or physical things, so it kind of, it's something I've thought about maybe way too much, but yeah.
We were saying earlier about like there's still a phallic object.
Oh yeah.
Why not get that? Why not get rid of that?
Because
Because it's necessary.
it's like, why do you have a drill if you want to make a hole, you know, like, or why do you have a hammer if you want to hit a nail? Like, the machine is a tool. There's been a lot of, in the discussions we've had, sort of riffing on, I guess, we definitely looked further back, like Renaissance kind of vibes, but like the 1800s, like there being a lot more, you know, I guess procedures around mateship and like finding a partner, getting married. Like the people were extremely religious, and like there was a lot of like sort of iconography, or there was just a lot
Ceremony.
more. Yeah, ceremony. Yeah, and so we want to vector a lot of that vibe into the process of interfacing the machine as part of the documentation.
I wanted to ask a crude question as well, because there is fucking involved in the machine, right? And the interaction with the machine. And fucking can be something that we can affirm, and it can be a sort of pleasurable thing, but it can also signify a power relationship as well. So I think one thing that we we were investigating with Michael in our earlier conversations, and we'd be interested to hear what your thoughts would be as well. It's like, what are the power relationships going on in this work? Who is fucking who with the machine?
When I was using the machine, when we first started, Candy was actually holding the remote control, and it was a very, very odd, like, this is like sharing a really intimate, like, secret part of the making of the work, but it was really odd because it was a three-way between me, the machine, but also Candy controlling the machine, and him trying to, like, penetrate to my rhythm. And then at some point Hydra said stop. Like, Hydra stopped it and said, Candy, can we please let Georgie use the remote? So we actually placed the remote at the head of the machine. So it was me and the machine, but I was actually using the remote at the same time, and it really alleviated a lot of that power dynamic and that awkwardness. And I felt a lot less vulnerable and a lot more in control, and it just felt better. So I guess there's infinite possibilities. If you wanted that experience with someone could use the remote control, or you might prefer to use it yourself, but there are definitely options.
Boundaries and consents, right? That's at the base of every intimate relationship. And it's something that probably in our mainstream culture we tend to ignore because our culture is based on power dynamics, but feeling empowered by an intimate relationship is very different from exercising power upon someone else. And I think that's what can be englobated in the idea of the extended body. That's what intimacy is. That's what the machine also offers. It becomes an extension of yourself. You let someone else in through the ritual and you become part of that person. The person becomes part of you. Isn't this what, like, sexual intercourse is supposed to feel like as well? Like, it's just kind of an out-of-body experience where the boundaries are more fluid.
Yeah, when it works well, for sure.
I think when you're describing, like, the role that consent plays, and when, Georgie, you were describing your experience with it, the problem seemed to be this, like, third other, but in the way that you were describing it, Hydra, there is in fact no other. There's a fusing, and that can be an issue, especially when there's this kind of machine, and is it the machine that's being fucked because it doesn't have any power to consent, or it doesn't have any power to draw a boundary, right? So consent can also be about drawing boundaries and deciding not to be involved in an orgy or not to be involved in reproduction, I think.
That's though thinking about the machine as if it was a person. The machine is its own thing. So I understand the tendency to anthropomorphize the machine thinking, but the machine is something that is being designed by a human being with a very, very clear intention. And so its dignity lays within its function.
I like that sentence means that we cannot violate the machine. We cannot.
You could use it for something other than its function, and that would be violating it, wouldn't it?
Yes. Turning it into a soft serve with Mr. Whippy Van or something would be really violating.
So there are ways to violate, and not necessarily by fucking it in the wrong way. Violating our work, our hard work, and our feelings through the machine could be, that I would feel like it would violate it when, if someone feels, this is something that I feel it could have happened, like, someone feeling like this is an obscenity and like destroying it and kicking it, and then that would have been so much more than violating the machine. It would have been, disrespecting us as hardworking human beings with pure intentions. By the way, you can also just hug the machine, just as
Does that violate its function though?
No.
Not in the slightest.
Ritual as well aesthetically contains a lot of distress or spilling out of things or abjectness. So if something's considered transformative or unclean or abject, and then we have a spiritual or cultural or artistic ritual around that, it kind of contains it, and it also signals to the viewer that this is okay, this is planned culturally and humanistically or civilly. This can and is meant to take place right now. The ritual was really meant to make the whole process feel clean, to stop it from like clunking or like falling into some brutal, dirty act or something, you know, and to lift it and elevate it up to a much more spiritual or holy place. And it seemed to do that. Like, we were really surprised when we showed the work how much it landed well with most of the audience members, or people seemed to respond really positively. Like, no one commented that it looked like essentially the three of us had a huge orgy with this machine.
Which we did.
Which we did, and that's what we did. We did this, we pulled off something kind of cool. Like, we were all fucking this machine and essentially fucking each other, and we filmed it. But we did it in a way that was gentle, thoughtful, really well researched and thought out, and it had a context and a purpose. So people were all behind it. They were like on board. They were like, that was stunning, that was beautiful.
Going back to your question, is this the reason, like, is this what is expected from the machine to create human life? I mean, the machine is a being and is a living being, so it has that function. It's not limited to that, it just exists, as well as natural life does. So there is this function of creating offsprings and facilitating that, as much as just the sole purpose of creating intimacy and facilitating transpersonal relationships.
I hate the idea that someone's like, I just really want to fuck this machine, and it has nothing to do with procreation. Like, it's like, you can do that elsewhere. Like,
which is funny because it reminds me the way we were talking about what does it mean to, again, creating an offspring out of the machine. And so we started wondering how it must feel to enable a more community-based way to create babies and raise babies, rather than our very binary conception of parenting that is very possession-based. So as you can see, there's we don't have answers, but we have a lot of very interesting questions that raised up.
I think it'd be good to like follow through on that idea as well. Like, so it has implications for both pleasure, which is something we discussed, and also like reproduction, which we were talking about earlier. But so in terms of like, then you get a result of reproduction, you actually have to look after it. Do you think this work, this machine, has anything to tell us about, say, the family and different formations of the family?
It gives options. That's the thing.
This machine doesn't seem like it's going to do the care work for you, for instance.
No, it's an intermediary.
Where will the machine be housed?
Yeah, I think ideally, like, I speak on behalf of us all, that we all agree that this at the moment, like, it's in a box and it's like a caged living being, and it needs to be like, ideally we would love to have it out installed somewhere permanently that could actually be engaged and interacted with at any time, and to actually set this up so that it has its own system. It has people who are trained to use it, trained to screen applications, and trained to facilitate the ritual, that this could just operate independently of us three, and it could just continue to live in the world. It doesn't matter what context. We would love to see the machine just live on.
Yeah. It did sound like you were just an IVF clinic.
Yeah, an IVF clinic.
Especially because, I mean, This first machine it's a tangible idea. It doesn't aim to be perfect. It doesn't aim to be fully functioning, although it is. But we were talking about female pleasure and adaptable pleasure, and like it's our first prototype that is ready to be studied.
I think what will be interesting for this project, though, is to see if this ritual that we've created and this aesthetic of beauty and cleanliness and holiness that surrounds the machine and this ritual that we've designed, does that stand, and does that still feel okay for an audience if a human is actually conceived through this process? Or does that then become erased and all of that research and all of that aesthetic treatment just becomes irrelevant and we've done something really controversial? Like at some point, I'm wondering if there's going to be a tipping point.
I think that we're at the point where it's like people are getting pretty tired of this whole cancelling thing.
We'll see about
We'll
that.
see.
Worried about this artwork, or
About being cancelled, or like
some kind of pushback, or
I was for a time, but also like on both hands, I'm either like really keen to just be cancelled and call it quits, but I'm not laying down my guard like that easy. I kind of feel like I'm very ready to have this discussion, and if I do step on some toes, like then I'm having the right conversation.
Well, what do you think you might be cancelled for? What do you think people are going to have a particular problem with?
A straight white man building a rape machine, like I could just see the headline, like, but yeah, I think that's, I think.